the time appointed. My name is Daniel Valles and welcome to our channel, and also welcome to the Brook Cherith. There is so much coming together here right now, a lot that's hard to review, so definitely make sure you have watched our last video, the 400th countdown. There's a lot of information in there. I highly recommend you watch it more than once to absorb everything that the Lord is showing us about this incredible time. So we're not going to be reviewing that in this video, so definitely make sure you have watched that. If you are new to our channel, we're just going to dive right on in. Right now we have just passed the new year for trees, which does not mean the significance of that is over. It means it is starting. We've just passed New Year for trees on the biblical calendar, the agricultural time of the year too, when the almond trees start waking up. And we have talked about how the almond tree, the actual word almond means wake up, because it's the first tree after winter, the first tree that actually wakes up, starts putting forth its blooms. Even though it's still cold outside, it's the first one that's waking up. And so that's why it has the idea of watching, looking, and alertness. And so this is what we really need to keep in mind here at this late hour. We've just passed an important milestone which tells us, wake up, watch. Important things are about to happen. Now's not the time just to wake up on one day and then say, oh, that day's over. No, now's the time to wake up, and then from that point on, especially watch this time period. It is high time to rise up and to put on the armor of light. It's high time to be aware of what's going on right now. And especially with this recent commemoration of the New Year for trees, reminding us now is the time when the almond trees wake up. That even the Bible with God and Jeremiah ties the almond picture with prophecy. God will hasten what he has said he will do. And particularly when we see here at this high watch time right now, with so many prophetic events coming together, being reminded, hey, now's the time to wake up. Now's the time to be on the lookout, because things are coming together right now. Now's the time to be watching. From this point on, especially watching and being sober. Be on the lookout. Be watching. And this goes with being wise, just like the wise men. I love this beautiful picture because the wise men, we can relate so much to them. And so many times we call this our learning journey, because it's a learning journey. We are the ones learning, just like the wise men. The wise men looked up. They lifted up their heads. They took notice of what the heavens were declaring with its speech and words, just like Psalm 19 tells us. There's also the prophetic expectation based on the Israel time clock that they knew the Messiah was prophesied to be born around that time. So by looking at Israel's replanting clock that was given the first time for his first coming, they knew we should be expecting him around now. So they looked up, they lifted up their heads, and they saw things that reminded them of that same significance with the Lion of the tribe of Judah and all that. But one thing I always like to remember, particularly on our learning journey, is the wise men were men. They were human, and they spent several months observing the sequence, the choreography of the celestial events before they went out to seek the king. And when they went out to seek him, they did not have 100% accurate information. If you remember, they went to Jerusalem instead of to Bethlehem. And this is an important lesson for us here, especially in context of being reminded to be on the lookout and to watch. Watch does not mean you just always go with what you know. Watching means you sit down, you zip your lip, and you watch. You observe, you take notes, what's going on, because we know that we don't know 100% of everything. We acknowledge we are the weak link. If there's something we don't know, it's on our end. But we also hold on to what we do know. When the wise men went to Jerusalem, were they wrong about everything else just because they went to the wrong place? No, they weren't wrong. They were right. And this is a powerful lesson that we always need to keep in mind too. We go forward with what we do know. We do know the celestial signs that we saw. We know how the Lord has worked and draw our attention to them, and the other things that Scripture tells us, listen for this, and when they say this, and watch for this, particularly the replanting of Israel again. There's so many things that we do know and we can see. What we often don't know, just like the wise men, is the application. How does this meet down to the ground level where I live right now? There are going to be things that we don't know, but they're going to be finer, granular details. There's going to be a lot that we do know, but when we ever get to the case where, oh, that didn't pan out like we thought it did, that doesn't mean we throw out what we do know. It means we continue to watch and we continue to be open to learning, to build on what we do know. And that's what the wise men did. When they got to Jerusalem and everybody's saying, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean a king's been born? I haven't seen a star. You know, the wise men could have been horribly disappointed and said, well, this is a bust. I'm going home now. Goodbye. They could have said that. They could have thrown out everything that they did know, that they were correct on. But they didn't do that. They had a learning spirit of, okay, the Lord has brought us thus far. Let's continue going forward in faith, understanding the Lord did show us these things. Let's continue going forward in faith, and let's go forward to see what else He has to show us to build on what has He shown us. And again, it is incredible to just consider the wise men learned new things about the prophecies regarding Messiah a year and a half after they saw the celestial signs. A year and a half later. And so this is so important when we watch, the importance of taking notes and not jumping to conclusions right away. Including decisions of, well, let's just throw away all that. No, there's great value many times, and we've seen this on our own learning journey, to observe and make notes. Keep going forward with what we do know. Keep going forward. And many, many times we have seen this on our learning journey. We get to a point where the Lord shows us additional information that comports with what He showed us earlier that we did not know fully about. And later on, He shows us the rest of the puzzle that gives a clearer picture because we did watch what He did show us. We made note of it. And later on, we can see how that fits in with what He is still trying to show us. And so this is a key characteristic that we always need to have. We need to have a heart like the wise men, to keep going forward on what we know, and also search out new avenues that build on what we already know. And going forward, searching out new avenues to build on what we already know can greatly expand what we do know and give us a greater and deeper understanding of the entire prophetic picture. And so like the wise men, we go forward on what we do know. We hold fast to what we know, and we go forward. We watch, we take notes, and we're also open to learn as we go and adjust and add in and search out new avenues as we go forward. Understanding that the Lord probably will be showing us more as we go forward. And if we don't go forward in faith, we should also have the understanding that He's probably not going to show us things if we don't go forward because we're not listening. We're not watching. So to be wise involves going forward even when you don't know the entire picture. Just like Peter, when he walked on water, he didn't know how it was going to happen, but he knew Christ would be faithful to hold him up, and he would be faithful to His word, to His call to come. So he went forward on what he did know. He knew the Master told him to come, and so he jumped out of the boat and started walking. The rest of the disciples who wanted to see, well, will this really work out? They continued to sit in the boat, and they missed out. And unfortunately, I see so many Christians doing the same thing. They hear Christ's call to search out and to see and listen to all the prophetic things. Look up, lift up your heads. They just want to sit back in the boat. Well, is this going to pan out? If it don't pan out, well, see, it didn't work out the way you thought it did. It's all fake. Didn't work out. You need to change your whole view on everything. No. Go forward in faith. And only when you go forward in faith will you see things that those that sit in the boat don't see, because they didn't have an ear to hear what the Master said. Let's be found wise. Let's be found rising up. Let's be found going out to meet the bridegroom when we hear His voice. The bridegroom cometh. Go ye out to meet Him. Scripture is like a treasure map. There are so many nuggets of treasure and wisdom that the Lord wants to show us. And even the Apostle Paul emphasized He wants us to understand the height, the length, and depth. And that is the most important thing. A lot of Christians are content to know just some trivia, head knowledge of this point and that point and that point, but they don't want to see and they don't want to watch the depth. It is important to observe the depth, to get into the subject. Not be content with just an executive summary or an elevator pitch of prophecy and, well, just give me the summary version. No. Watch and observe what the Lord is working and doing. Follow His instructions. And if you follow His instructions to watch what He says to watch, to see what He says to see, to hear what He says to hear, to look up and lift up your heads, if you follow the instructions, then you will see more as you go forward. Scripture and prophecy does not give us 100% of the picture for a reason. Because part of seeing prophecy, like the wise men going out to meet the newborn Messiah, part of it is in the journey, seeing the reality of how the Lord guides and directs the learning journey to help us see the depth of prophecy and see the reality of prophecy. And that is what you can't see by mere book learning and just mere summary versions of prophecy. You cannot see the reality of how things go together. You have to experience seeing how the Lord shows you that things go together. And this is why it's so important to be patient with prophecy, to watch and go forward on what you do know, understanding who gave us the instructions to do it, understanding He probably has a lot more that He wants to show us, understanding that we will learn more as we go forward, if we have an ear to hear. And it has been incredible to see this learning journey process, to see this treasure map process as we've gone forward, as we've looked at the prophecy, particularly with the calls of peace and safety. And we've talked about this a lot, and we've noted many times this prophecy is unique because it's boiled down to one single verse, which means there is not a lot of details about it, but the Apostle Paul treated it like it's very, very important, and even spelled out that yes, it is very important. But why would such an important prophecy have so few details and criteria in it? 1 Thessalonians 5:2, For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, Peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief. A super short prophecy, really summed down to one verse. And the Apostle Paul was really emphasizing you need to pay attention to this. Listen for this. Understand the sequence, what it means. Sun destruction is coming. It's going to come on the same ones who said it. But notice, and we've talked about this many times, we pointed out, this has been one of the perplexing things about this prophecy. There are not a lot of details. Okay, it says, when they shall say peace and safety. That's pretty straightforward. We've been able to see that. But then, sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child. A woman. Doesn't even tell us anything about the woman. It doesn't even tell us anything about the pregnancy length, or her periods, or cycles, or anything about what sudden destruction is coming. Sudden destruction is what's being birthed. But you're just vague. It's very vague about how it's coming. It's telling it's coming like this, and then it changes the subject. And so this has been an interesting part of our learning journey, is how exactly is this applied? Because there's obviously a pregnancy cycle and a parallel ongoing here. He tells us there's going to be a warning that tells you sudden destruction is coming. This is how it's coming, like a woman going into labor. And obviously the sudden destruction isn't there when the call is made. This tells you how it's coming. It even tells you this is how it's coming. It's coming. It's on the way. And this is how it's coming. A pregnancy parallel. So this has been one of the puzzles on our treasure map as we've gone forward in faith. We've heard the call, yes. We're not going to throw that away when, our first understanding of trying to figure out how this pregnancy fits in. We're not going to just give up when that doesn't seem to work out. We're going to scratch our head and say, okay, there's something here, and it's being deliberately ambiguous, and there's some reason why he's not going into a lot of detail. That should always catch our attention. On this treasure map of trying to understand prophecy, we should be asking the question, why doesn't it give a lot of detail? Because Scripture wants us to draw our attention and do some digging for the treasure that is in that ambiguous statement there. And again, this should make us scratch our head when we realize there's not a lot said here, so that probably means there is more than what could be said in here. Let me say that again. When we see that he's telling us really pay attention to this, and this is how it's coming, and he is obviously not giving clear-cut instructions of this is how many days it's going to be and all that sort of stuff of a pregnancy, and it's going to be 9 months. When it's actually leaving out certain details like that, that means there is something that we should already be bringing to the table with our library of knowledge of Bible prophecy and the patterns that go with all this. There is something that the apostle is assuming we're already bringing to the table when we get to this point. Something that is apparently more complex than just a straightforward pregnancy picture. Understanding something about prophecy being foretold and it coming in a birth parallel. There is more here because it's not going into detail here, and that should clue us in that there is more here that we better be digging into and finding out. Particularly when we start looking at pregnancy cycles and seeing, oh, well, it should be, 40 weeks, 42 weeks. And that brings us to an estimated time where we have seen things unfold in the world, brought us to the exact time of the Great Conjunction, brought us even to the very day of the inauguration where we saw very suspicious activity. So there's a lot of things that we can see, even just with a very elementary understanding of the pregnancy picture. We can understand, okay, this is bringing us close to a ballpark. We know it's getting us close. And obviously the enemy's getting real hyped up all of a sudden. And they know the end is near and sun destruction. But why are we going past a normal pregnancy picture here? A normal pregnancy parallel. There's something we're missing, even though we know we're in the ballpark, but there is something we're missing. What is this that we're missing? Well, let's continue digging where this treasure map is pointing us to dig. Let's do some more digging around this subject of pregnancy parallels in prophecy. particularly when we understand that the Apostle Paul, who wrote this prophecy, knew of something that would apply here at this late hour when they are going to be saying this. And if you download our PDF poster, The Final Countdown, you can find a link in the description box. You can see a lot of peace and safety calls that we've seen the world make, and particularly Donald Trump with his big emphasis leading up to the high water mark call on January 28, 2020. So there is a lot that we do know. We know that first part of that prophecy there. When you hear them say this, okay, check, we got that. We've heard them say that. That's pretty simple. But the application is where we're trying to figure out exactly how does this apply. We know it's bringing us real close, and we know something's up right now. But obviously we're past a normal pregnancy picture, but something is still in play. We can see that it still applies here, but what else are we missing that previous prophecy parallels also point to that give more light on the understanding of how these do go together? Is there something that the enemy knows about this time from prophecy that we haven't found yet? Because obviously we know we're in a very good ballpark, but there is something we're missing. But we're still going to go forward in faith. Just like the wise men, when they got to Jerusalem, they realized, okay, we're missing. It would have been nice to know this before we traveled all this far, but okay, we're here. Let's continue going from here. Let's keep going forward. Let's keep going forward. And so this is what we've been doing. And as we go forward, we start to see more and more, as we go forward in faith, why the Lord hasn't given us particular information, because sometimes there's other scripture and prophecies we need to know so we can understand more fully the pregnancy picture that he and Paul are talking about. Again, we've talked about the enemy knows Trump would be involved with the peace and safety, the sun destruction. They have set him up to do that. They knew it'd be set on his watch. They knew also the ending application of the sun destruction would come in events tied to President Trump, which we've seen really kick in the high gear around the time of the inauguration, especially in the weeks even leading up to that. And we definitely saw his calls on January 28, 2020, his calls and his plan to divide the land of Israel, the vision for peace. And of course, we knew about it because he was talking about it for the past 3 years, drawing a lot of attention to that. So we knew there's a lot that we do know. And right at a normal expected time, just looking at an elementary pregnancy cycle, that brought us right to the time where even the enemy was starting to really ramp up. They understand, yes, the peace and safety does apply here. And so we knew just with the elementary pregnancy cycle, we're in the right ballpark. We're on the right foot here. We're going forward. We know we're in the neighborhood, but there's something we are missing that they know. They know something that we don't know. All we know is we're in the neighborhood. And so we're going to keep on going forward, going from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. And particularly the more that we have seen and observed the enemy, that yes, they not only know the time, but they know certain things about the they who put out the calls for peace and safety. That yes, even the enemy does seem to strongly put forth that they know the one, Donald Trump, who put out the calls of peace and safety, is still going to be involved in the picture, and he is going to be involved in the sun destruction too, which they knew ever since his inauguration in the first place too. And it's been incredible as we've gotten to the neighborhood. We've gotten to the Jerusalem, just like the wise men. And we start saying, okay, where's the sun destruction? Where's this pregnancy giving birth to the sun destruction? Where's that at? And then we don't see it. And like, okay, we know we're in the right neighborhood, but obviously the enemy does know, and there is something that they know. And that is another interesting parallel with the wise men going to Jerusalem. They asked the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are the one who told them. The Pharisees, the enemy, the very ones that Jesus even called the serpents later on and vipers, they're the ones who told the wise men what they were missing. Oh, he's going to be born over there in Bethlehem. So again, so many parallels when we understand we're in the right neighborhood, we know that, but then we also start to notice they, who we've been told to pay attention to, it's obvious they do know something more is in play than just an elementary pregnancy cycle. There is something more. What is that? And yes, praise the Lord, he's been giving incredible wisdom recently, particularly with our last video, showing us, yes, there is incredible other prophetic considerations that you must consider here at this late hour that the enemy has already been knowing all this time, particularly the 400-year count and the people within a strange land. Yes, there are some incredibly powerful, important prophetic considerations that you have been missing up until this point. But you couldn't really understand them until you were brought to this point and started to see particularly what the enemy was doing relating to the capital and important government functions here in the United States. A lot wouldn't click until you got to this point, which the elementary pregnancy picture did bring you to this point, but now you can keep going further. Go from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. And it's definitely caught my attention how the enemy was focusing on January 20th with all the events pointing to the 400 count and the corona and the crowning and everything there pointing, drawing attention to the Washington Monument. And then just a few days later, we weren't surprised at all, I wasn't at all, that they blacked out the Washington Monument. It went dark at night. And it caught a lot of the news attention. I was really surprised how much news it got, and also on social media. A lot of people were commenting, oh, the Washington Monument's out. This means democracy falls in darkness. And they were actually saying that, and things similar to that, because a lot of people see that monument, because it's one of the largest, most notable monuments in Washington, D.C. When it goes dark, people take notice that that landmark is not being lit up. So it definitely caught my attention that that was on January 24th, just a few days, really a few hours after the inauguration. They brought attention back to this monument to Horus Osiris, bringing attention back to it because that is the core subject that they are celebrating here at the Slate Hour, the Horus Osiris. They are expecting to crown the one who is coming. And it really caught my attention, the lame excuse that the Park Service used. The timer was bad, that's why the lights didn't come on, and that's why the lights were off for the entire night. But then they put out a news statement the next day that until we can get the timer fixed, we're just going to manually turn on the lights ourselves. It's like, wait a minute. You mean you could have turned on the lights manually that whole night and you didn't turn them on manually? I mean, how long does it take to figure out that the timer's busted and the manual switch is probably right next to the timer? You mean you can turn on these lights manually and you didn't? You actually purposefully left them off all night to draw attention to them? Yes, that was their lame excuse. Oh, the timer is busted, but we'll just turn them on manually from now on. With such a lame excuse, that tells you they turned off the lights on purpose, when you see how easily they can turn them back on. They left it off. They drew attention to the Washington Monument for a reason, right at this high watch time. Right at this time where we are already expecting the sun destruction. Right now, we've just passed the 1-year anniversary of the Cause of Peace and Safety, January 28, 2020. We just passed that. And so again, we were looking at, is the 1-year anniversary, is that applying? But how in the world could that apply? Because that's not a normal pregnancy. That's way long. That's really way long. Yes, we could see how it could go to the day of the inauguration, but here at the 1-year anniversary, how can a pregnancy actually go that far? And obviously we're going a little bit beyond that too. So how does the pregnancy parallel? We're told this is how it's coming. How does it fit into this call? We've heard the call, and obviously the enemy knows that it is in play, and it seems to apply in this neighborhood. But how can there be a pregnancy picture? How? But as we are expecting the sun destruction in this area to come somehow with a pregnancy picture at this point, I am reminded what happened back in Wuhan, China in October 2019. And we've talked about this several times. This was instrumental in the enemies leading up to the COVID. They knew that was coming for sure. We've talked about that with Tom Hanks' movie, and obviously he was involved in the inauguration ceremonies too. The whole thing's all scripted. They all know this COVID nonsense and what it's going to result in, and they know sun destruction's coming. But at the Military World Games in Wuhan, China in 2019, we pointed out that it had a huge peace theme as well. And this really caught our attention because it was only a few months away from when Donald Trump released his peace and safety call, which definitely blew this out of the water. But this was strange to see them in concert. And then later on, as we saw with March 11th declaration of the pandemic and COVID coming onto the scene, right at the same time, the Chinese New Year, when Donald Trump was releasing his peace and safety, that brought to mind what happened at the military games in Wuhan. Already at the beginning of 2020, we knew something was very suspicious with the COVID just because of where it was coming from and the peace and safety calls that they put out at those games at that very city. Then obviously more research really showed more of how planned it is. But there was definitely a push for peace and safety at this World Games with the flame of peace and the torch of peace and all that. But one thing I've pointed out several times is that they had Jackie Chan as one of the lead singers with the different ceremonies there. And they were singing all about peace. Guns are gone, swords are going to be turned into plowshares. It was really odd to have this huge peace theme at a military World Games. And then to have Jackie Chan, who is known as a singer, so that wasn't unusual, but just to have him there, involved in it. Because it's urban legend that Jackie Chan claims he spent 12 months in his mother's womb. That's an urban legend that's highly associated with Jackie Chan, and he keeps repeating that it's true. In interviews, he keeps repeating that it's true. So it caught my attention that he was the lead singer during all these peace and safety ceremonies at Wuhan, China. And I mentioned this before when we were talking about pregnancy considerations, that I wondered if the enemy was trying to show that there really is a 12-month pregnancy cycle that applies, not a normal 9-month or 10-month pregnancy cycle. It seemed, we've mentioned this before, it seemed that you could take it, the enemy was telling their disciples that a 12-month pregnancy cycle goes with these peace and safety calls. As weird as that sounds, that really seems to be the message, and I pointed that out before. Even though it doesn't seem physically possible, they seem to be pointing to a 1-year, 12-month cycle with a pregnancy, because they also knew the major peace and safety calls were going to be going out during the Chinese New Year, with the events unfolding in Wuhan, China too. It's all scripted. So we noted before that it is possible that they are pointing to a 1-year cycle, although we don't know how that is possible. But they do seem to be pointing to a 1-year cycle. So again, this goes back to the wise men and the treasure map analogy. We go forward in prophecy with what we do know, the points that we do know. Okay, when they say this, check, we got that. And then as we go forward, the application is where it can get a little fuzzy. And just like the wise men, they saw the signs. Okay, yes, they understood he was born, check, check. Now, where do we go from here? That's where it got a little fuzzy, and that's where they learned more as they went forward. They learned more a year and a half even after they saw the celestial signs. But they were a quick study, and they did not give up when they reached the limits of their understanding when they got to Jerusalem. They kept going forward in faith with what they did know. And as we go forward in faith, we understand and we acknowledge, okay, yes, it's getting fuzzy. Here's what we do know. Here's what some things that we think might be in play. But if we do reach a point where we go past these dates, we're just going to keep on going forward, understanding there's a lot we do know. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That would be ridiculous. We're going to keep going forward. If we come to Jerusalem and our expectation is not there, then we will have a very good idea that we're in the neighborhood, and Lord will lead us further when we need to be led further. And that's how he's always worked too. Lead us to Bethlehem when we get to Jerusalem. God actually wanted the wise men detoured in Jerusalem because it highlighted the knowledge that the Pharisees and the king and people there in Jerusalem had, or their lack of knowledge about the subject going on at that time too. So sometimes God sends us on detours or makes us go the long way because he's showing us things that are instrumental in understanding the depth and the reality of prophecy. That's why he doesn't always tell us all of the granular details ahead of time. There are some things that he wants us to learn as we start digging. There's going to be some things that are really clear. When you hear them say this, check. Then it gets a little fuzzy. But then there's also clear parts after that. Then sun destruction's coming in. It's coming on the same ones who said that. So there are going to be fuzzy parts. But when we see those fuzzy parts, we understand, okay, we're going to have to do some digging here. We're not going to get quick summaries. It's going to demand watching, it's going to demand patience, and it's going to demand faith, going forward in faith on what we do know. So again, everything that we've seen so far has brought us to very important times of the winter solstice to the inauguration that tied, all those things tied exactly with the celestial signs that we saw. So we know there's a lot that we do know. And things that are happening. We also know we are in a neighborhood of sun destruction. But we also know we're past a normal pregnancy cycle, a normal pregnancy window, how a woman's body normally works, starting from peace and safety. So even though we see we're past that, we do see that we're still in the neighborhood. And the enemy knows we're still in the neighborhood. So now is when we ask the Lord for wisdom. Lord, there's something I'm missing that apparently the enemy knows. Show me, give me wisdom about the pregnancy picture and how this applies, because this is an important part that we seem to be missing here that the enemy knows. Lord, show me, how does this apply? And it caught my attention just shortly before the 1-year anniversary of the Peace and Safety Call, the Lord gave additional wisdom going forward. But as we've gotten to this point and we keep going forward in faith, understanding, okay, yes, we are going forward, understanding sun destruction is here, although we don't know exactly how it's possible, we can see the enemy and the people in this neighborhood do know it does apply here. So we're going to keep going forward in faith. And when we don't quit and we keep digging in the area where we expect the treasure to be found, we do find more treasure. The Lord shows us more nuggets that apply where we are right now. And especially here at this time with the New Year for trees, where we are told, watch. Not just on this day, but from this point on, just like the almond trees. You need to wake up. You need to start watching from now on, going forward. Especially watch over the days ahead. This is a high important time. And again, this brings us to our learning journey with the sun destruction. We already knew this general area, this neighborhood, was a time for sun destruction. And we were already looking toward this area and the major people involved in it, Trump and Pence. And as we've gone forward, it's really been intensified that yes, they really do know this is an important time. And their themes with their Nova Solar Seclorum, they're really coming together and they're really building right now. They know the beginning of Trump's presidency was the beginning of the end. And they also know the end of his apparent presidency with the events at the winter solstice a few weeks before the inauguration. They put out the same messaging, it's not the end of the world, with Katy Perry, who was the major witch involved in the events at the inauguration. Because yes, they know the sun destruction on Columbia is still in play. Because there are things that they do know. And there are some things that they know that we didn't know at the time too. But as we got closer and we started to see the events unfolding, particularly in the land that put out the calls of peace and safety, just a few days before the one-year anniversary of those same peace and safety calls, the Lord brought our attention to another timepiece prophecy that is in play. And why they know the time, it's because they are watching a prophecy unfold even in their own country, with the pilgrims, the strangers that are in their land. The prophecy that we hadn't known about, wasn't really considering, but all of a sudden the Lord brought our attention to it and really made things click. This is why they know the time. This is why they are getting all ramped up for the sun destruction. Because yes, they do know it is a time. They are watching a timepiece which you weren't aware of before, but now you can start to see how that fits in with the peace and safety calls and the sun destruction that they know. Why the children of darkness said the peace and safety calls when they did. And so as we go forward in faith with what we do know, the Lord gives us wisdom that builds on our journey as we go forward, and we start to see more of the depth. Why didn't Paul say much there in 1 Thessalonians 5? Because there's a lot more involved in understanding the timing than just a straightforward elementary pregnancy cycle. There is more to it. It's understanding that there is another timepiece, there is another clock timer going on at the same time. You got to watch both of them. And then the more that you do watch and you dig in that spot where you expect the treasure, you'll start to see how close these two are. The enemy knows the time because there are certain things about the timepiece and the prophecies involved that as we keep going forward in faith, we will learn more about ourselves. And it will also give us clearer understanding of why they know the time is so short, because we will see a clearer understanding for ourselves. They've been studying it a lot more and longer than we have, true. We're a little late to the game, but the Lord is leading us forward as we go forward in faith. Going forward, watching, and obedient going forward in faith. So part of our understanding now with the sun destruction and understanding why they know the time is seeing the pilgrims and their involvement as the pilgrims, the strangers that are in the land, and how there is a set time frame for them. This other people and nation that God would bless until the time of the Gentiles was fulfilled. And then the prophetic focus will switch back to Israel. So as the Lord has given us wisdom about the strangers in the land, the pilgrims and their role, we've started to see more the reality of not just the prophetic time, but also seeing the reality of this country. And we start to see why the children of darkness were doing so many things with the United States of America, with its history, with the capital cities, with all these monuments. It becomes more real to us when we start to see, wow, this is the scriptural prophetic understanding that tells us the time. But this prophecy is also real today. We're not just seeing one or two prophecies fulfilled today with Israel and things happening over there. We're seeing God do a work with the Gentiles still today on the prophetic clock that also tells us the time, how late the hour is. We're seeing incredible things that we would have missed if we did not dig in the spot where the Lord brought us at the right time going forward in faith. There's so much we would miss. And we would not see the depth. We would not see how it all comes together. There's so much we would miss if we gave up, if we quit, if we turned around when our limits of our understanding were reached. But as we go forward in faith, we can see and we can reach a point where we're open to hear the Lord. Lord, give me wisdom. There's more here. I know there's more here. Show me more. Show me what I'm missing. Lord, Father, I need wisdom from you. And once we reach that point where we are going to watch, but we're also going to wait, we're going to seek his face for wisdom. That is what he wants to see. He wants to see us come to him for wisdom. He wants to show us the time. He'll give us enough to give us an understanding and a hunger for the time. But then once he starts to see, Lord, I really want to know the time. And I know there's a nugget here that you're holding on to for a reason, because you want me to dig for it. Lord, show me. I want to see the incredible treasure and richness of this time beyond just a surface level. I want you to show me the depth. Show me the richness of your hand at work in this world, in this time, and in prophecy. I want to see you, Lord. I don't want to just see prophetic trivia events. I don't want to see morbid curiosity. Lord, I want to see you at work. I want to see you at work. And when we reach that point where we want to see the Lord at work, then we will go forward watching the Lord work, because he knows we are watching and he can show us. So it's been incredible to see how he has shown us so much about the pilgrims and how the important role that plays in prophecy. There is so much about this important time. It's amazing. Even the U.S. Postal Service has just put out a Mayflower stamp as well, commemorating the 400th anniversary. The anniversary of when these strangers in the land made a covenant with God to bring forth fruit for God. An incredible event with so much prophetic implication. Now in our last video we saw how it was at the end of January that they started unloading provisions from the boat, because they had a few structures there in the colony, and so we were getting an idea of when did they really move into the land. Obviously on December 21st, that's when they had their first landing party, so that can really be considered when they entered the land. But then we also saw over the days after that they were starting to build structures and move more into the land, actually get more off of the boat. So I was just doing some more reading, just trying to get more details of where exactly were they making this transition toward the end of January. What was going on at the end of January? And so I did a little bit of digging and found the ship's log from the captain there, and he just gave a day-by-day account of what was going on. And this really helps get a better idea of what's going on the ground level, especially toward the end of the month. And so on our January 27th, they were starting to unload the ship, some of the pilgrims' goods there onto the shore. Because at this point the pilgrims had a common house, a house where they could bring all the sick and set them up. They had a number of beds and mattresses set up in there. But unfortunately they had a fire just a few days before that there, so they had to move the sick back to the boat and everything. But one thing to keep in mind, after they landed and started setting up, they always had some guards, some people there on the land. Although most of the people would always come back after working, they'd come back to the ship for the night for shelter. But by January 27th, they had enough set up with the common house that they were starting to unload some of the pilgrims' goods. On January 30th, they finished a storage shed. Now on January 31st was interesting because that was a Sunday, and that was the day that the pilgrims kept their services, their worship services, on land for the first time in the common house. So this by itself is a unique historic marker, just understanding up until this point they've had all their services on board the ship, but now they're really starting to make a transition to the land. They've got a common house set up, they've got a storage shed, and now they finally reached the point where they can all on land have their worship services on Sunday. And again, considering this is a covenant people, covenanted to God to bring forth fruit for the glory of God, it is beautiful to see how they finally reached this point on the last day in January where they were finally able to have services there on the land. They finally entered the land in worship and in service. And over the next few days, they continued to unload more and more of the boat, work on more houses, more structures, and it would take them a while because a lot of them are sick during this time and just the weather. Again, it's a New England winter, very cold out. So some days are better than others, and they're also sick. So it did take them some time to finish unloading the boat and finish structures where they could move off of the ship. But already they got a common house, a storage shed. They've had their first worship services there on the land in the common house. So in a sense they have moved into the land, but at this point they're still unloading the moving truck, so to speak. That's what the ship is. It's really the moving truck at this point. Now by February 14th, 2 weeks into February, the captain made a note that they had unloaded enough of the ship that the ship was now in danger of oversetting, being light and unballasted. In other words, apparently they've unloaded almost all the heavy stuff of the pilgrims. The pilgrims were still sheltering on the ship, coming back at the end of work days, again because it's very cold outside. But they've unloaded most of their stuff. They mostly moved in 2 weeks into February. They're already in the land, they're already living there, they have sick people in the common house, they're holding worship services on the land, but they're still in a moving in transition time. But by February 14th, they've unloaded most of the stuff. Now, because of the winter weather, and it's taken the pilgrims a while to build the houses and structures, and mainly because a lot of the pilgrims were constantly sick and the ship's crew was constantly sick, the ship actually didn't leave until April 15th. But that was mainly because everybody was sick. It just took them a while to recover. The captain didn't want to leave too early while his crew was sick. So again, after December 21st, the winter solstice, when they landed at where they were going to finally set up, after that point, the ship was really like a moving truck. And it definitely caught my attention how one of the major moving shipping trucks today, the company is called Mayflower. It's just beautiful to see the same analogies even today. On December 1st at the winter solstice, that's when they started entering the land. And by the end of January, they were well underway in unloading and starting to really move into the land. They've already taken possession. By the end of January, they've essentially taken possession of the land for sure. They built a common house, they had a storage shed. They're just in the process of unloading the moving truck still. And over the next 2 weeks in February, that would be when they'd be unloading most of the stuff, getting it off of the ship. So most of the transition time is toward the end of January, right at the very beginning of February. But they're already in the land. They've already taken possession. So again, coming back to the timeline, and again, definitely study the timeline. You can find a link in the description box. There's so much to cover every single day. I've added these new details to the timeline down at the bottom, just so you could see the historical major milestones that the pilgrims were having at the same time. Because this guides our understanding to the timepiece that is in play here, the 400 years. There isn't a set date where we can say, okay, here's when the pilgrims finally moved into the land. Because it was a transition time, it's right around here. We can't say there's a day or hour, but we can see very clearly that it is just a period of a few days, just a few weeks. It's a very narrow window, but again, we do see how it ties in with the major celestial events as the winter solstice, with the Great Conjunction and everything like that. We can see we are right at a window, right at a neighborhood where we are expecting the timepiece to change, the 400-year count to finish. And we're seeing it in such a general window that it could be any of the days right in this window. So it's really interesting to see more as they unload and really get more of their feet on the ground, so to speak, just to see how the picture gets stronger and stronger as we go forward just over these few days right here at the end of January and the first few days of February. Which is also interesting to see the same correlation that the 1-year anniversary of Trump's peace and safety, the 2-week window for that falls in the same exact window where the pilgrims were unloading the boat and really moving in. So again, we can see at this window that, okay, we're past an elementary understanding of a pregnancy, just how it normally happens with a human woman going from the time when the peace and safety calls were made. We've seen that understanding has brought us to the window right here, and even to the exact day of the major celestial events and everything, and even the day of the inauguration. So there's a lot that we see how it has brought us to here. Understanding, okay, it just ended a few days ago. Why is there a gap here? There's a gap in our understanding here. There's a lot we do know, but we can see there's a gap. We could also see the enemy knows something about this time too. What is this gap? How does this correlate? The enemy appears to know that the gap goes further than a normal pregnancy. Why? What is it that we're missing? And again, this is important as we go forward in faith. The Lord will often show us things on the treasure map, on our treasure digging, that is important in the next step. The clues of where we need to dig next, of where the treasure really is. Just like the wise men coming to Jerusalem again, they got really close, but then they were told and given the clues, oh, it's right over there, just 6 miles away. They had no idea they were that close, and it's a good thing they didn't quit. They kept going forward in faith and searching out, seeking, what is it that we're missing? There is more to it. Where is he that is born King of the Jews? And we need to have that same attitude as the wise men. Where is the piece? Where is the nugget that I'm missing? What is the clue? We've seen so much of prophecy. Lord, show me more. Show me the depth of how this prophecy intertwines and weaves throughout this prophetic time. What's going on in the world. Show me the reality of prophecy. Show me what other people don't see, Lord. I want to see the treasure. I want to see the richness of your hand at work here at this late hour. And so as we've gotten to this point where, okay, we're expecting the sun destruction right around here. We see it is apparently in play by the enemy activity, but we don't know. We're missing something with the pregnancy picture here. But then the Lord shows us there's another timepiece you need to be aware of that the enemy is aware of too. This is important, understanding why they know the time. Because they are watching a countdown on a timepiece that you weren't paying attention to at all. Timepiece with the strangers that are in the land, this other nation that is going to bring forth fruit till the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. And so, as the Lord starts showing us these treasures, we start to see, Okay, the enemy knows this timepiece. And there is something about this timepiece and the fullness of the Gentiles that probably relates to the pregnancy picture. Particularly once we start realizing the prophecy with these strangers and pilgrims does relate to a seed, to offspring. And so this is so beautiful to see how the Lord gives wisdom as we go forward. You know, just a few days ago, we came to the 1-year anniversary of the Peace and Safety Calls. We came to so many things where we started to see the limits of our understanding with an elementary pregnancy cycle. And so I was asking the Lord, what is it that we're missing? We see so much that is going on, and we can see the enemy knows something we don't. What is it that we're missing, Lord? And so the past few days, I've been asking the Lord every single day, throughout the day, hour upon hour, Lord, what is it that we're missing? Lord, show me. Show me. I want to know. What is it that correlates and brings these two together? You're showing us they are related. How are they related? How does this go with the peace and safety? With the pregnancy picture that we know you have shown us? What is it that we're missing? And so it's been beautiful to see how, as we seek His face, our Father gives wisdom because He wants us to know the time. And He also wants us to come to Him seeking His face for wisdom. Not trying to solve it all on our own. Not trying to handle everything on our own. No, He wants us to come to our Father and to seek Him for the depth and riches and things that we can only understand from our Father. Our Father knows the day and hour. We do not. The more that we seek His face and place ourselves in position of patiently waiting, Lord, I will wait on you because I know wisdom comes from you. Strength comes from you. Lord, I will not get wisdom even from your word in my own understanding. I need you. I need the Holy Spirit to guide. I need wisdom from you, Lord. Lord, give me wisdom, call to remembrance what I need from your word, so your word will be like a light to my path, so I can go forward in the way that I know you're leading. Lord, show me wisdom. So it's been an amazing few days asking the Lord for wisdom, and then how the Lord has so beautifully given wisdom that so beautifully clicks and makes so much sense. But again, it's wisdom that has to be experienced. When we go digging, when we seek our Father for wisdom, when we seek our Father's face for clues for what He's trying to show us, the treasure He's trying to show us. The prophecy with the strangers in the land deals with a seed, a new people. And why was there a need for a new people, a new nation? Because the nation of a seed going back to Abraham was not bringing forth fruit. They rejected the chief cornerstone. So Christ said, I'm going to bring forth another nation. I'm going to give the kingdom of God to them for a while. It's going to be a Gentile nation. But it will follow in the pattern of the seed of Abraham, because it will be to a nation that will bring forth fruits for God. They will be children of God. And since they are not the Hebrews, because they're not the Israelites, that tells you it's going to be the Gentiles. The Gentile seed of Abraham. So this is very important when we consider, how did the first covenant with Abraham take place? It was a promise to him that Sarah would bear a son, bear a seed that would carry his name. So the very first promise covenant that was to Abram, dealing with who would become the Israelites, that was at its core, it's about a baby being born. Because this promises to Abraham that he's going to have a son, when it looked like that wasn't really possible. It wasn't going to work out. But this is very important to consider. This whole prophecy revolves around having a baby. Having a baby. And so when we also consider the second parallel, that the seed of Abraham by adoption, those grafted in, the same parallels will follow for them. Understanding the parallels for this nation that will bring forth fruit for God, understanding there's going to be a lot of parallels with the covenant that was made to Abraham. So to understand how it is in parallel to the pilgrim nation, as strangers within the land, we need to see what was involved. What was the time frame when the promise was made to Abraham? When the promise was made to Abraham, was Isaac born right away? No. There was a time delay. There was a time delay. Now take note, God told Abram that his seed would be 400 years in a strange nation in Genesis 15. A few chapters later, he gave more details. Genesis 17, verse 21. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. Okay, this is very important. God is telling Abraham exactly when Sarah is going to give birth. But notice it's not in 9 months. Which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. This is important because he's telling him straight up, Sarah's not going to get pregnant right away. It's actually going to be a few months. But you will know the fulfillment of prophecy because she's going to give birth at an appointed time. She's going to give birth at this time next year. She's going to give birth in 1 year from today. Take note of that. This whole covenant about the seed of Abram, who would result in his offspring being strangers in the land for 400 years, that one would be born. The birth would be 1 year from when God was talking to him, when God made the promise to Abram. He said it's going to be 1 year. The birth of the one who is prophesied will be in 1 year. Not 9 months, 1 year. There is a time delay before the pregnancy starts. Now this is important because this is emphasized more than once. Chapter 18, verse 10. God speaking again. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. Again, this is really important because he's emphasizing there is going to be a cycle. There's going to be an appointed time where she is going to give birth. She is not going to get pregnant right away, but she will give birth. She will travail in pain 1 year from today. Verse 14, he emphasizes this again. Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed, I will return unto thee, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. This is so important to understand, especially when we see that Scripture emphasizes this 3 times. When God emphasizes something once, that's enough, but when he emphasizes it 2 and 3 times, we really need to pay attention that he keeps repeating this birth of this promised seed for you, Abram, is going to be in the cycle of life. It's going to be in the time of life. It's going to be in a year cycle. This set time next year. And that's what appointed times on the clock are. They're appointed times that happen cyclically. They happen once a year. And then life, the year, cycles back to that point. And so again, this whole promise about the promised seed, the one who would be born, it's emphasized to Abraham 3 times. It's going to happen at an appointed time. That's how you will know it will be fulfilled. Because there's an appointed time. It's going to be this day, a year from now. A year from now. She's not going to get pregnant right away. Take note of that. It's going to happen according to the time of life, the cycles of life. This set time, this appointed time, and that's literally what the word is, this appointed set time in the next year. That's when she's going to give birth. That's when the pregnancy is going to finish, is a year from now. So when the Lord pointed that out in context of understanding the strangers that are in the land, the pilgrims that applies to the timepiece in play today, that the enemy is fully aware of, the Lord really showed how that gives insight to the Jackie Chan urban legend and why he was chosen to head up the singing ceremonies there at the World Games in Wuhan, China, with a big peace emphasis, as a foreshadow letting their disciples know, yes, it is going to be a 12-month cycle according to the cycle of life. Peace and safety call, when you do hear that, it's on a year count, not a normal elementary pregnancy understanding of 9 months. It's going to be 1 year because the timepiece deals with the seed of Abraham, the adopted seed of Abraham. So it will follow in the year cycle of life, just like his first seed of Abraham that dealt with Israel. And so praise the Lord, this really brings home a reality of the presence of the prophecy that is in work right now. As we go forward in faith, the Lord gives us wisdom for the steps when we need to take them. He has been guiding us thus far in incredible, beautiful ways, showing us nuggets that we would have never seen if we only went forward with just our perspective and just what we knew with our own limitations. If we just took a morbid curiosity or trivia approach to prophecy and say, well, that pregnancy didn't happen, so that means all prophecy is not at work. I've seen so many Christians take that approach. No. Go forward with what you do know, understanding the Lord wants to show you more. Be like the wise men who are willing to learn even quite some time after they started the journey. understanding sometimes God will bring us on a detour because he's trying to show us other things that build our understanding, seeing the reality. When the wise men saw the star stand over Bethlehem, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy, because they had just come from seeing those who did not even understand what was going on, who hadn't seen the signs, who hadn't seen the stars, who weren't even looking for the Messiah. By God taking them a detour through there, it added more richness to their experience. They experienced more of the reality of prophecy coming true in their lifetime, and that God was personally showing and directing them to experience something that nobody else in that entire area saw or experienced. Because they kept going forward in faith. They kept going forward in faith. And as they went forward in faith, the Lord was able to show them more, directing them forward. Because he wanted to show them not just prophecy being fulfilled, he wanted to show them the reality and the richness of the Messiah coming into the world. In a way that the Pharisees, who had a head knowledge, they had a head knowledge of all the facts, but they never saw the reality of it. They never saw the reality of it. And as we consider our learning journey that the Lord has brought us on, friend, I want you to see the reality of it. And the reality will only be seen by waiting on the Lord, by watching, by going forward in faith on what the Lord does show us. We go forward in faith on what we have. Faith is not blind. We go forward on what the Lord has shown us, expecting our Lord and our Father to show us more when we need it as we go forward. So when we look on the timeline, again, link in the description box, definitely check it out every single day. Check it out. We've seen so many incredible things. When we first started, when we heard the calls of peace and safety, we started with, okay, there's an elementary understanding of pregnancy. We understand this is when the call was said. Here's a normal pregnancy window. Here's some of the higher limits that a woman's body can go with it and still be normal. But then we also looked at different pregnancy windows. Okay, exactly when did this pregnancy cycle start? Did it start on the day? Did it start 2 weeks later? Did it start at the end of a month from 2 weeks later? We put all those notes on the Final Countdown poster. You can read all that. We've made notes along our learning journey because we understand, yes, there's some parts that we are fuzzy on. This is why I want you to read and look at those posters. So you can see we're not making blanket statements. We're telling you straight up there's some things we don't know. But we do know it's going to get us pretty close. And we can see a lot of things that tell us, yes, we are pretty close. And just at a normal human pregnancy, around 40 weeks, that brought us right to the winter solstice. And we definitely saw at that point with the celestial signs and everything else going on there, okay, yes, we know we're in the neighborhood. The enemy's definitely ramped up a lot of things right now too. We know we're in the neighborhood. Things are on track. Where's the sudden destruction? And so we started doing more research and more digging for the treasure of, okay, exactly how does this pregnancy picture fit in here? When does it start? That gave us some flexibility, and we started to learn more about the importance of March 11th, and then started to see 45 weeks exactly to the day of the inauguration too. So that is the importance of going forward on what we do know. Going forward is going forward. Let's not be going backwards. Let's not be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Let's go forward on with what we do know. Just like the wise men, they went forward with what they had, and that brought them very, very, very close. And at the end, they just needed a little bit more information to carry them the rest of the way. Same for us. We've seen what we've understood so far brought us to a lot more where we've started to see more and more going on, all during that window and time frame there. And we've seen how it lined up with the celestial events going on in the heavens. We've looked up, we've lifted up our heads, said, okay, yes, there are important things that the heavens are declaring. The Lord wants us to see. We do know we're running out of time. We don't know how much time we have left. We just know we're right here in the neighborhood. Lord, give us more wisdom of how close we are. But we've definitely seen how the two synced up. The calls of peace and safety, what the enemy and the children of darkness were doing down on the ground level with what was going up in the heavens, what the heavens were declaring. And as we've started to try and study more of that, the Lord's given more wisdom on those celestial signs too, which then showed us more about what the enemy was doing. So the importance, keep going forward in faith. Keep going forward in faith. And then so beautifully the Lord has given us wisdom of a parallel timepiece that is also in play. Why the children of darkness know the time. Why they know there's a 400-year countdown. Why they know they are very close to the end. And why there are certain things that they know. Because there's a whole other timepiece that they are watching and aware of too. So the Lord's given us wisdom about the pilgrims and this other nation that God would bless and give the kingdom to till the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So that is so beautiful to also see how that lines up with November 21st with the Mayflower Compact signing, and then December 21st, the winter solstice anniversary, the same day as the Great Conjunction, when the Pilgrims had their first landing, when they landed where they were going to set up the colony, and then brought us to this time now where they're starting to unload the boat, unload the moving truck. They have the common house. They are starting to have their first meetings, their first worship service meetings. This is why they were in covenant to God. They had the worship services on the ship as well. But this is unique because when they made the covenant back in November, this is now where they're making reality. We are coming to this land to set up a colony to worship God here and to advance the Christian faith, to bring forth fruits for God. And so here at the end of January, it's so beautiful to see the reality of their covenant with God, them following through. This is why we came to the land. This is what's going to be a top priority for us. This is what we're going to do. We're going to stop everything else, and this is what we're going to do today. We're going to worship God. Because this is real to us. We are in a covenant with God. So beautiful to see. And so when we look at the timeline right now, understanding there's a window here where they are unloading the ship, and we know they're going to be unloading most of their stuff through February 14th. So there's about a 2-week window where we know they're still moving in a lot of their stuff. But we know they're going to be mostly moved in by February 14th. And then we also see how this same window overlaps with the cause of peace and safety. Donald Trump released the plans on January 28, 2020, but then the news and everybody else was talking about it for about 2 weeks after that. We've mentioned that before. And you can clearly see that in Twitter tweets, just going through the archives. The world was strongly talking about that, major people talking about his peace plan to divide Israel for 2 weeks easily after he released it. And then COVID started taking the news attention more and more, because this peace plan was released right during Chinese New Year with the events that unfolded from the World Games in Wuhan, China. So again, we are considering with the peace and safety calls, them saying it is not limited to 1 day. He released it on 1 day, but then the world, the news media, they were talking about it in concerted effort, talking about it for 2 weeks. So we're looking at a 2-week, 1-year anniversary. Understanding the cycle of time, the cycle of life, understanding just like the parallel with the seed of Abraham, that all got started with the birth picture too. And it was set and emphasized 3 times. This is going to be on a set appointed time. The baby will be born at the appointed time, a year from today. A year from today. So as we look at the clock and calendar and we see and considering the enemy does appear to know that they know a year cycle is also in play. And we see them definitely ramping up so many things, it helps us understand why they see the reality of the time. Because they see the reality of the 400-year countdown, they also see the reality of the 1-year cycle of time, and the more that we see the 2 parallels, how they're tied together, we can understand why the Apostle Paul, who told us about the adopted seed of Abraham, and how we are grafted into those same promises, how when we hear them say peace and safety, when we hear the children of darkness say peace and safety, we know sudden destruction is coming. And it's coming just like a pregnancy parallel, like a woman in travail. And understanding who is hearing that, it's the adopted seed of Abraham who are grafted into the promises. When we consider those promises, we consider there is a birth promise with those promises. The promise that a birthing will take place at the appointed time. At the appointed time, a year from today. So praise the Lord for all that He is showing us. We're going to be watching, especially this 2-week window. We will go forward in faith on what the Lord is showing us. And we will continue to go forward, asking the Lord for wisdom. Watching, and living as though we are watching. Which means we are going to be listening for our bridegroom, and we're going to be living as though we are hearing Him. We're going to live as though we are watching. And again, remember, this is the time of almond trees, the time to wake up, the time to watch. From this point on, over the next few days, now is a high time to watch. And so that's what I want you to do, friend. Watch. Review these videos, review the resources that the Lord has prepared. The Lord has brought us on a learning journey to this time, a time where we are now emphasized, watch and be sober, which is the exact same warning that Paul gave when you hear them say peace and safety. You will need to watch, and you will need to be sober. Just like the wise men, we've looked up, we've lifted up our heads, we've observed things, we've been able to say, okay, there's certain things we know, check. We've been able to write them down, we've been able to then go to the next step. Okay, how does this apply to where we are now? What's going on? That's going to be a little more fuzzy. That's going to take more research. That's going to take more digging to find out why what we do know happened. How does this apply now? And like the wise men, we watch, we observe what's going on with the choreography up there in the heavens, what's going on down here on the ground level, what's going on. Let's make notes. We may need those notes later. Let's go forward in faith with what we do know. There's a time when the wise men had to put into practice what they knew, even though they did not know everything. They knew enough. And friend, we know a lot. We know enough to go forward in faith. We know enough to act as though time is short, to live as though time is short, because we see the day approaching. With what we do know, with everything that we have seen, we do see the day approaching. So now's the high time to act and to live as though we see the day approaching. Watching not just the news, not just the celestial events, but we need to be watching ourselves. And this is what the Apostle Paul emphasized too. Watch yourself. Be sober. Watch how you are living. Draw nigh to the Lord with a pure heart. Draw nigh to the Lord with a true heart, a genuine heart. Drawing nigh to God, drawing nigh to our Father with a true heart, a genuine heart. Lord, I want to hear from you. I want to see the reality of your presence in my life. And to do so, I will draw nigh to you with a true heart, a genuine heart. We will purify ourselves, we will sanctify ourselves, and we will consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more, as ye see the day approaching. And we see the day approaching, friend. We see the day approaching because our Father is so beautifully showing us the day approaching. And the more that we watch Him and go to Him and seek His face, the more we see the reality experientially that the day is approaching. Definitely check out the resources in the description box, download them, print them out, study them. The Lord has prepared these as part of our learning journey to prepare ourselves so we can draw nigh to the Lord with a true heart, so we can see the day approaching. He tells us when to watch. There are so many plain things that He wants us to do, and a lot of Christians don't hear more from God because they won't even listen or look at what He tells us to watch and to listen for. If you won't even start with step 1, don't expect Him to take you to step 2 or step 3. Are we listening to what we know? Are we acting on what we know? Just like the wise men, are we acting and going forward on what we do know? As we go forward, we'll get more wisdom. If we're not going to go forward and act on what we do know, then we shouldn't expect Him to tell us more. We shouldn't expect to hear from God more if we're not going to listen to Him in the first place. As we see the day approaching, when we are watching what we're supposed to be watching and listening to what we're supposed to be listening to, we need to make ourselves ready. And that also shows we are listening to our Father. We are drawing nigh to Him with a true heart. Not a fake heart, not just pretending, not just a form of godliness. We are drawing nigh to Him with a true, genuine heart of love and service for our Father, the one who has adopted us. Be ye ready, and let's run for the prize. Let us go forward in faith on the promises that our Father has given us in His Word. We have heard so many trumpet calls that have told us one resounding message: the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet Him. That's our responsibility, like the wise men. We know He's coming. We look up, we lift up our heads. We've seen so many celestial signs. We look at the world, what's going on. We can hear them say certain things. We can see geopolitical events going on. We can see it all coming together. So many things telling us the bridegroom cometh. Don't sit where you are. Rise up, trim your lamps, and go ye out to meet Him. Just like the wise men. This is what we're called to do. So let's rise up, friends. Let's trim our lamps. Let's shine bright so we are drawing nigh to our beloved with our lights burning. Let's gird up our loins, be found in His service, drawing nigh to Him, hearing Him, heeding and obeying Him, watching Him, loving Him, and serving Him first and highest above all else, going forward in faith till He comes. Maranatha.